Morning, everybody. Sorry for the delay. Technical issues here, but we're here and up right now. So welcome to Ancient Mystery. Ancient Mystery is a red tea. It's from Yunnan Province, and I've dropped out.
It's very interesting. Dropped out like
camera's dropped out. I think you can hear me though.
Interesting. So this then
there must be some
there's some kind of problem
connection.
Probably.
Yeah.
Unfortunately. Okay, I'm gonna turn this off and turn it on again.
Ah, now we're on. Oops, on and off. There we go. Oh, and presumably you can hear me. Well, you can hear me the whole time. All right. Hopefully all connections and everything stay in place. Ancient Mystery from Yunnan Province, Jingmai Village. Actually, Jingmai Mountains. There is what? There is a village in the Jingmai. In fact, there are many villages in the Jingmai Mountains. And this comes from ancient tree. And these trees are over 1,000 years old. I don't know what the oldest of them are. And they have a graduated forest. They have old trees, they have ancient trees. So by the end of today's session, you're going to understand who lives up there. You're also going to have a deeper understanding of their relationship, particularly the Bulan people, their relationship with tea and the land. So this is going to be more focused on the cultural terroir rather than the physical terroir. I'll start off with the physical terroir. As I mentioned right at the very beginning, it's in Yunnan Province. But where in Yunnan Province? It's not that far. In fact, let's give some numbers. It's about 20 miles, 15 to 20 miles from the Burmese border. So it's really, really close, really southerly in terms of Yunnan Province. It's a subtropical climate, millions of insects. Of course, that's true everywhere. But what I really meant to say is millions of large, very seeable insects everywhere. So that is one aspect. Food there tends to be very spicy, not hot spicy, but just a lot of spices. The cooking there tends to have a lot of local vegetables, herbal medicines, herbal concoctions. So it's a really interesting place. Culturally, there are 5 main groups where this tea comes from. So there's the Bulan group, they're in charge. Then there's the Dai group. And let me back up because I just said somebody's in charge. What I really meant is they've been there for a long time and they kind of set the tone for the relationship with tea plants. There's the Dai people who are ethnically the same as the people in Thailand. There's Hani, there's Lahu, and there's Wa. So 5 different ethnic groups. They live together in harmony and actually intermarry in some cases. So it's a very different type of cultural terroir compared to, say, Anhui or Fujian, where it's mostly Han people. They traditionally wear their costumes, they speak different languages, and they actually do have different customs. And how do they think about tea? And what is their relationship actually to tea plants? For the Bulan people, tea is a spiritual as well as a physical plant. So the tea trees. That's stuff we can all see. We can walk through there and so forth. But the spirituality connected with the peoples is really what's interesting, because for them, it's almost like the mother plant of the area. And tea leaves are treated not just as a beverage provider, it's more about actually the whole interaction, including as part of the food. So it's seen as a vegetable, and frequently it'll be part of the mix, either of the spicing of the food or actually in the food itself is one of the things you would consume, and not as a beverage, but more for its vegetal nature within the food. This area just this year achieved World Heritage status. And it's really interesting because it's a 72 square kilometer area. It's really interesting because when we were there, we knew that a lot of activity was occurring. We could see it, we could sense it. We didn't know it was going to end up like this as a World Heritage Site, which is a wonderful thing, because as a World Heritage Site, everybody, both internationally and domestically, focuses on preserving, focuses on understanding cultural attributes, focuses on making sure that the configuration of the area stays beautiful, stays pristine, as much as pristine as it can be with human interaction. So first off, trying to get there. Nowadays, more difficult than ever, because there's roadblocks everywhere as you're trying to get down there. And it has to do with trying to control traffic and trying to make sure that smugglers aren't coming in from the south, all sorts of activity. That's the easy stuff to overcome. The hard stuff is actually finding the villages, because you drive up these roads that are lightly or not really marked at all, and you're looking for all sorts of land, all sorts of signals that you're on the right road, but it's not. If you're not used to traveling this road, you just wouldn't find this place. You can't wander into this village by accident. It's so far off the beaten path. Once you get there, what you're welcomed with is beautiful people. People who are open, very open to experiencing relationships with other peoples. They want to understand other peoples. They welcome other peoples to visit. They especially welcome tea lovers to visit, because, again, this is what they worship. The land itself has developed in an interesting way, because over the centuries, new villages in that area. So what am I really talking about? I'm talking about from the Burmese border north to about 50 miles north. And in those mountains and in those villages, the various ethnic groups settled over the centuries, and they moved about, and as they developed new tea areas. And that sounds, when I use that type of language, as if they're, oh, let me plant an ancient tree here and oh, wait a minute, you don't just plant ancient trees. Well, let me go find an ancient set of trees within the forest, and let's establish a village nearby. So that's how come you have these villages which over the years, oh yes, this village is 300 years old. Oh, this village is 500 years old. Oh, this village is 7. This is 250. Why? Because villages broke off from existing villages. And there's all sorts of historical reasons why this occurred. So instead of focusing on the historical regions, let's talk about one simple occurrence that occurs within society. You have people marry, and as they leave one village and go to another village, the village becomes enlarged to the point where, as you have kids and so forth, where time for a new village, because too many people in that area to support the village. And so people, usually of the same ethnicity, go off and find another plot of trees. So that's how these villages developed over time. When they actually planted tea plants, which they did as they went to new areas and cleared them, they usually cleared very carefully, making sure that they didn't damage existing ancient trees or very old trees, and planted new tea plants. And these tea plants were a focus in the early years and got a lot of attention to make sure that they got up and going, and they were usually grouped together, but they weren't monoclonally planted. In other words, unlike most of China, where you have tea fields, or India, or Sri Lanka, you walk out there and you see miles and miles of tea fields, and it's all bushes, all relatively close together. This wasn't the case. This was, yes, they're within an area, but there's many feet between each plant, and there's other plants growing around. And so they had a different concept of how the tea interwove with the existing plants. And that's one of the reasons that when you go to the older fields, you can tell that they're planted. And you can tell that they're planted because, yeah, you've got maybe 80 trees, small trees. And by small, I mean, what do I mean? I mean about 20 feet tall, something like that. And yes, they're there in this relative area, but they're not right next to each other. And there's other plants growing there. It's just unlike most of the rest of China where you see tea that's actually been planted and growing. So that's another part of the cultural terroir. When a woman went and married, one of the key gifts she would bring as a dowry would be cuttings from the tea plants in her village. And that was considered very honorable. That was considered very important. And that was also considered a connection. So tea not only served as this vehicle to consume, vehicle to eat, but also socially to link villages together. So it had this overall overarching importance. And what about if you accidentally or on purpose pick somebody else's tea tree? Was this looked at as like, oh, I overstayed my stay at the parking meter? Or was it more, I've committed just about the worst crime that I can commit in these type of villages? It's the latter. And by the way, when you were caught doing this, you had to make an admission to the whole village. Then you had to swear that you would never do anything like that again. And then you had to do physical labor around the village. Usually it was to extend a road or a path, and then you created a card which stated your name and what you actually did, and they put that by the side of the road. So this was a reminder to everybody, don't do this stuff. Otherwise you're going to get into the road of shame. So how is it that most of these tea trees are processed? Are they processed, generally speaking, as red tea, or as raw black, or as composted black? How are they processed? So you have all three styles which come from this area, and you have a surprisingly large amount of red tea that comes from this area. Why do I say surprising? Because most of the other surrounding mountains focus a lot less on the red tea and much more on the pu'er, both the fully cooked as well as the raw pu'er. In other words, the green pu'er versus that which has been artificially composted. The process for this tea is roughly the same process we've talked about for the last 5 or 6 weeks, the last 5 or 6 sessions. It's going to be a pick, and in this area, you have spring picks, and you also actually have fall picks. They don't pick during the summer, and again, because of their relationship with the trees, when they pick, they're really thinking all the time about, this is my partner, this is my spiritual guide. Therefore, I ask you this: compared to the pickers in other parts of China where you're doing monoclonal picking, do you think that perhaps this relationship creates even more care in how the tea leaves are picked? The answer is it absolutely does. Not only that, because the families located to these areas, they have specific trees, and everybody knows whose tree is whose. There isn't, oh, darn it, that tree looked just like my tree. Sorry about that. No. So the relationship between the people and their trees is extremely close. In fact, let's stop just talking about the trees. Let's talk about the overall land. And let's talk about all the plants on the land. The relationship between the people and the plants on the land is amazing, because they know what every plant that their eyes can detect will do in a positive way for humans. They've tested. It's as if they've tested every single one. And you walk along with the elders. Oh, you see that plant over there? That plant is really good if you have an earache. Hey, you see that one over there? Now, that's really good if you're coughing. They have a pharmacopoeia in the forest, and they understand it. When they eat, they pick certain vegetables. Vegetables you and I have never seen until we go there. And they put them in. No need to ask what they are. They'll give you the names. Meaningless. You taste, oh, this tastes good. And then you ask, well, what does this do for me? If your knee hurts, it takes care of that. And so they eat, they worship, and they take care of the land all in an organic, unified way. Now, let's see here. I said they eat and they worship. Does this mean that maybe they don't use pesticides in this area? It absolutely does. What do they do instead? Because remember, I opened this up with the incredible description of the millions of seeable bugs everywhere. So during parts of the year, the pests in the area, particularly if there is a difference in weather patterns. So global warming, of course, is a big difference in weather patterns. If it creates the wrong type of dampness in the wrong season, or dryness or drought, you have an effect also on the bugs. So when it's historically becomes intense, what do the villagers do? They actually go out into the forest and they throw food on the forest floor. Oh, wait a minute. Maybe this would solve our pesticide problem here. Just go out, bugs in deep concentration. We throw rice and corn and so forth. Maybe that could take care of it. Why is this so beneficial in this area? Because the bird population swoops in, and birds, in addition to eating grains and other delicious offerings, they eat bugs. And so this is one of the ways that they control pests during the big pest seasons. It's really interesting. They have a completely different viewpoint of farming. They have a completely different viewpoint of interacting with the land. So have they made some of the industrial development mistakes that some of the other villages in other parts of Yunnan have made? And the answer is no. They've been careful. When they built new villages, they build these elaborate things. They're very beautiful. They're almost temple-like in some of the houses. They've got beautiful designs. Some of these villages would just knock your socks off in terms of the beauty of the village themselves. But are they close to the tea trees? No. No, they're always a great distance away. The runoff can't affect. And historically, they've always looked at the mountains in that area as zones. Okay, this one that's lower to lower elevation, we're going to do stuff like rice, and we're going to do other stuff. Next one up, okay, we're going to do some other things. Next one, oh, this is where the tea trees are. Can't do anything up there. Fruit trees, they planted a ton of fruit trees in this area over the centuries. And those are planted in a little bit lower and in the same elevations as the tea trees. So you have all of this stuff growing together. And again, it's about unity of the land and the use of the land, and an understanding of how man interacts with it. So there are very few places that we visit where you get such a deep reverence for the plants, linking them to man, where man almost is a partner, and a secondary partner, by the way. The plants themselves are the primes, and then people interact with them secondarily. Yes.
Question from participant. If families are associated with trees, does marriage lead to tea blends across the trees?
There are so many ways to answer this great question. So this is a question about the blending, and let's use this. Okay, I've got to answer what I think the technical question asks. And I think that technically there's two parts to this question. One is, do families actually, when they intermarry, have kind of blends that come from the result of tea trees, new tea trees being planted in their area? And so the answer would obviously be yes, they do. They do. But do they think of it as a blend? The answer would be no, because they don't break it apart like that. But you and I, because if you're asking, well, is there tea from the southeast portion of this village with northwest portion? Yes. Even more specifically, what happens when tea leaves the village and goes to big processing plants in Munghai? Well, those all get blended with other parts of, or with tea from other areas within Yunnan Province. And usually those are done from a taste perspective, because each of the areas has distinctive taste notes. And at the big factories, they understand this, and what they're trying to do is produce something that will blend it. Not always. Sometimes they actually do keep them within a specific area. And in the village, they always try and keep them. They're not bringing stuff from outside the village. Great question, though. So let's go ahead and brew this thing. And for help with that, I'm going to ask the tea master Biju to come and demonstrate for you how this is brewed. So you'll watch, you'll see what her tableau is, and then whatever your tableau is should be some variant of this. You don't need as many of the things as she has here, but the principles should all be in place. So it is my great pleasure to bring Biju, tea master, up.
Yes. Good morning. 早上好. My name is Biju. Yeah, we do 红茶. It's a 红茶 from the Hula mountain and Jingmai. Yeah. So it's also my tea tree.
So she's putting the 4 grams.
Yeah.
Strainer.
Yeah. Cha hai. You can use it. Yeah.
So you see how her tableau is set up? And now she's going to go through the process of making sure that the cups are absolutely clean, spotless. You can use any water between 170 and 212. Doesn't really matter, because this is about heating the heating the cups, making sure things are clean. Those 2 things. And she has all of her equipment set up on a nice rosewood tray, which drains directly into the sink. And these things have rubber drains on them, so you can set them up in places that aren't a sink, and it works just fine. So she's drawn the 175-degree water that we have pre-programmed here, and she's going to dissipate the steam, aerate the water. And remember, we do this in order to bring out brightest flavor. Somebody asked me this last week, and actually over the course of this year, we've had lots of questions about this, and people continually come back to how good these cups are. We took 2 years of experimenting with hundreds of different styles of cup, and this one ends up being absolutely top choice for bringing out the best of the flavors. And it's the shape of the cup, it's the glass itself, what they use. It really works very, very well. She puts the leaves in the heated cup, shakes, waking up the leaves, smells to make sure that she has what she thinks she has in there.
And the target temperature is 170, right?
Yes, I wrote 175 in the description to you, so you can use any temperature between 170 and 175. This can withstand a little bit hotter, but yes, if you do 170, you're going to get a maximal effect. All right, and then we put 3 minutes on, we set the time.
A participant asked, sorry, one more question on brewing. Does it matter how high you pour the water when you're doing the steam dissipation?
You know, this is also a great question. How high should it be when you're doing the aeration of the water? Does it matter? And the technical answer is it doesn't matter enough for you to be worried about it. Anything that you can do in terms of controlling, this is more about control than it is actual height, because you'll find that if you keep it relatively lower, water's not going to splash all over the place. Until you practice enough times, as you go up inch by inch, more and more water goes everywhere except where it's supposed to go. So as you get more skilled, though, you can aerate at a greater distance, and the benefit of that is it cools faster. But if you have more time and want to preserve all the water, doing it at a lower height works just fine. Great question. All right, so your tea, not your tea, the tea that we're dealing with today, the ancient mystery, it's half on the top, half on the bottom. Beautiful configuration. We've set the 3 minutes. What I told you was that this red tea is processed in, generally speaking, the same manner as every other red tea, but we all know that there's a big asterisk next to that, right? Because the same manner means the same gross steps. So you got to pick, you got to wither, you have to bruise the tea leaves, you have to oxidize the tea leaves, pile and oxidize. If you're going to shape, you can shape either pre-oxidized or post-oxidized. Lastly, you got to bake. These are the gross steps. In between all these gross steps, there are thousands of variations of finer steps. And when you get to the indigenous peoples areas, which is where this comes from, you tend to have fewer of those refinements. And it sticks more to just the basics. But what's unusual is their interpretation of how long the basics should take. The other thing that's unusual is that they do everything by hand. 3 minutes is expired, timer tells me. Tea master not in a hurry, full of tea rhythm, being present separates the tea leaves from the tea liquor. Make sure that she saves all of those leaves because second and third steepings are available. Let's look at this. Color of this thing is just spectacular. And compared to, say, sparkle. Remember when we did sparkle a couple weeks ago? That was light. Flavor was single note and good, but the tea liquor was light. And then last week, when we did Arcadian, oh, that was darker. Hey, let's look at this again. This is darker yet. All right, so let's enter the quality arena. So first thing I'm going to do is look at these leaves, smell these leaves. I didn't even really need to bring the cup to my nose to smell. This is so distinctive. But you do need to bring the cup to amplify that effect so that you detect any of the intricacies that may be contained in this. And there are some. You're going to take a 175-degree sip. And when you take that sip, and actually I'm going to take it, when I take that sip, I'm entering the quality arena. And what I'm trying to determine is where's the astringency? And remember, it's going to be different for all of us. I'm going to try and determine, is there an aftertaste? What is it? And thirdly, energetics. And then on the second time around, I'm going to verify those things, but in addition, focus on aroma and focus on taste. So let's enter. Okay, I'm getting astringency here. Oh my goodness, I'm getting an aftertaste. Energetics, let's not be quick. Let's not be hasty. Okay, I'm getting a sense of what the aroma and the flavor of this are presenting to me. It's your turn to brew. And while you're getting yourself ready, make sure your water is 175. 170 is fine also. Make sure you, this is leaves from bag number 3 labeled Ancient Mystery.
We have some comments already. So, ancient mystery. So far, the mystery for me is the consistency of fragrance, from the tightly rolled green tweed leaves in the bag to the pot to the liquor. That elusive, sweet, and floral scent. Then a pleasant, juicy swallow, yielding warmth to the core, a negligible dryness on the tongue and lips, a sense of well-being as my hands cradle the warm cup, looking into the light brown broth, closing my eyes and thinking pleasant thoughts. I am so fortunate.
Great opening comment. I'm going to summarize that in a minute. Watch first what she's doing, because you should be doing the following. And then we'll summarize that comment. So again, dissipating the steam, aerating the water. Just being present while you do this. Putting the leaves in the heated cup, shaking. And adding the water. Remember to set your timer for 3 minutes. Make sure your recipient cup has hot water in it. All right, let's talk about that comment for a minute, because there's a lot going on in this comment, and I like the breadth of the comment. So it starts out with warm leaves and
consistency of fragrance.
Consistency of fragrance. I love that as a starting point, because remember, I said aroma turns out to be important in this. And then I said, going back and amplifying that aroma will help you pull apart what's in this aroma. What was the next part of that?
Well, the commenter says, what is that aroma? That's an elusive, sweet, and floral scent.
Ah, love that. Elusive, sweet, and floral scent. So in other words, this isn't a single note. This is a bunch of notes that are competing. And so as this commentator is going through. They're working with those competing thoughts. What was the next part?
Next part is that there's a juicy swallow yielding warmth to the core with a negligible dryness on the tongue and lips.
Negligible dryness on the tongue and lips with a juicy warmness heating the core.
And a juicy swallow, sorry.
Juicy
swallow yielding warmth, yes.
Yielding warmth. So I like this because it captures a bunch of things. It captures it's easy to drink. It captures, hey, there's a warmth. The energetics have a warmth to them. You know, you can imagine yourself, say, in Maine, and it's snowed and it's cold. So you take a post-gentacular walk in the woods, you come back, and then you confront ancient mystery to heat you up.
Nice. And then energetics at the end of this same comment, a sense of well-being for her as her hands cradle the warm cup looking into the light brown broth.
A sense of well-being as this participant's hands cradle the cup and look into the beautiful essence of this tea. Yeah. Is there anything more to say? Well, the rest of you are going to tell me in a moment what else there is to say. There's a lot with this tea, and it's very different from Sparkle and Arcadian. And yet, everything is ancient tree, sorry. Your timers have gone off. And you're separating the tea leaves from the tea liquor. And yours should look something like this. And remembering, this is Jingmai. So Sparkle was from Non-Knoll Mountain, which is further to the north. Arcadian from Ilau, further north yet. And now we're as close to the Burmese border as we get. Oh my goodness.
Smooth mouthfeel, but not juicy for this other participant. There's a very slight whole mouth astringency that is extremely subtle that gives the liquor more heft.
Whole mouth astringency, slight, which gives the liquor, tea liquid, more depth in the mouth. Why do I like this comment, and why do I like it a lot? Because this commentator has, without using the words that we've used in previous sessions, you know, we've talked about thickness and so forth. This commentator captures that. Not only is it a thickness, but really it's a coating in the mouth. Great comment. Oh, the other part of that comment, which was interesting, not juicy for this particular commentator. So I like the fact that you're all beginning to make distinctions. And by the way, if you were just about to say, well, Christ, it's juicy to me, go ahead and say that, because this, again, we're all built a little differently. And this isn't such that there is one word or one set of words which will describe it the same for everybody, because we perceive it differently. But everybody's within the guardrails. And that's just truly terrific. And actually, they recognize the things you're saying in Jingmai. If you were talking to them and we were translating it, they say, hey, gosh, these guys are true tea drinkers. One of the things, by the way, I was saying beforehand was that the real difference in those who process ancient tree leaves and our indigenous peoples, they by custom all have some different timings. And what are these different timings driven by? I have a theory, or we have a theory, and that theory has to do with what they're cooking, what they're eating, what their palate is. So what seems good to them is a cultural bias, isn't it? Yes.
Question from a participant. Considering the relationship between the tea and the people, how did you convince them to let some of the tea travel to us?
Oh, this is a really interesting question. Given the relationship between the tea and the people, how in the world, what sort of sweet words and sweet promises did we make in order for them to release the tea to us? The real essence of why we get this type of tea, and now I'm 100% serious, and that is showing up. When you show up with respect and honor, then people feel, hey, these are the type of people I want to have an experience with. We not only showed up year after year, we did better than that. We brought an esteemed group from here in 2019 and went out there and stayed with the people in the Jingmai Mountains for a day or two. We were, in quotes, honored guests. And they couldn't believe we had made this journey from so far away. We appreciate and we demonstrate that appreciation year after year. It's not an accident. We talked about this year how the Japanese wouldn't sell us certain teas in bulk because we didn't have the relationship. Same thing in China. If you don't have those relationships, you're not going to get the tea. Yeah.
Another participant comments, the infused leaves revealed yet another interesting aroma of vegetal and with spicy qualities with its already delicious and fragrant scent.
Spicy qualities, slightly vegetal with this delicious scent is what this commentator mentions. Why do I like this? Because when I said you amplify the aroma and then you follow it up with a taste, you start to pull apart things that if you are in a hurry, if you aren't in tea rhythm, you're not going to get. You're going to just speed through, oh, it's good, go to the next thing, and not realize, oh my God, it was very, yes.
Another participant comments that he likes the golden amber color. His nose has the sensation of cider, but he's been wondering lately that once you sort of see, quote unquote, cider in a tea, whether it cannot be unseen.
Oh boy, oh boy. This is a great, great comment because it's something that I usually hesitate to talk much about because I understand that when I taste this before you all have a chance to taste it, if I say out loud what I think it is, hey, you got it in your mind. Hey, he said, oh yeah, I see that. And that's why I never save this stuff first. You have to tell me because you're right. Once you start to get an impression in your mind, unless you bring yourself to a spot and say, wait a minute, let me be in tea rhythm and take a second and a third and in tea rhythm pull it apart. This is a great comment because we trick ourselves sometimes with initial impressions, and that becomes the headline and the story. When in fact, you can have a headline, give me the facts of the story. Go through and get all the facts.
Another comment from a participant, I get that spice as well, and some earthy apricot, like if I walked past an open window with stewed apricots with a spice blend inside.
Oh, I love this comment. Oh, and this one, it'll be hard to get out of my head. Like dry, did they say dried or
like
stewed?
Earthy apricot, and then went to stewed apricot with spice.
Stewed apricot with spice. I love this comment because it encapsulates the possibility of fruit. It encapsulates the possibility of floral, because remember, fruit and floral language sometimes get intertwined. And it picks up the previous comment about hints of some sort of spice in this. And stewed apricots, that captures it all. Captures it all. Great comment.
Another participant says, when held up to the light, I see tiny trichomes.
Yes, there are tiny trichomes in this, and let me hold it up to the light and take my glasses off. Yes, but note, even as you say that, think about when you drink Silver Needle or Loquat Companion or Stunning or Compass. Think about the trichomes intensity or density that you see in those versus this. Oh yes, I see trichomes, but not anywhere near the number that I see with the other teas that I just mentioned. Okay, let's see how I'm doing. Oh yes. So today, and in fact for this last 6 weeks, we covered 6 different red teas, all done in different styles. They followed the basic rules that we've talked about, but we went from the very fine crafted into this last set of 3 from 3 different regions that were ancient tree, all done by different indigenous peoples, all done their way. They didn't ignore the basics, but they handled them all differently with stunningly different results. You captured those results as you've gone through and tasted over the last 6 weeks. I salute you for your attention to detail, your attention to tea rhythm as you understood these results. The other thing that you got during this period was not only physical terroir, you got some insights into cultural terroir. And that's really important because these are people who are doing this. And these are people who worship tea trees who are doing this. All the indigenous peoples, to a greater or lesser degree, have a very strong relationship with their ancient tea trees. They realize these are really special. What's the equivalent that we have here? Okay, great question. The equivalent would be for those of you who go into Yosemite or Kings Canyon and look at those sequoia trees and are in love with those sequoia trees. There isn't anything like them anywhere else in the world. And that love and appreciation, the awe, this is the same feel that I get from the indigenous peoples when they're talking about these tea trees. Yes.
What's the vintage on these tea leaves, and is there any food you would pair this with?
So the questioner asked, when did we get these? And my answer would be 2016, we got these. And the food pairing, this is really something to do rather than food, as it's really more about when you need to feel warm. Actually, there is something with food. If you have food that is highly fatty or heavy, this is a great tea afterwards. It's a fabulous tea afterwards. All right. So we're thinking about the next session. And for those of you who are green tea aficionados, oh, you're going to be happy this next session. For those of you who think you don't like green tea and think that you understand green tea, if you miss this next session, you will be sorry, without question, because we're going to start off with blindsided. Blindsided is very nearly the most expensive green tea that we have in the shop. And it's expensive because it's rare. They only make it once every 4 or 5 years. And the climatic conditions have to be right. The picking conditions, bunch of things that have to go right. And, oh, and by the way, does the public have access to blindsided? Oh, no. This is really what we're going to do next week. Only among the tea literati in China. And when they make it, it's typically only for those in the tea industry. So that's what we're going to start off with next week. The week following, we need satisfaction. Satisfaction is another wonderful, big green tea. But you know what? For the third week, let's do encore. Hey, I'm not talking about green tea encore. This is yellow tea. And it's yellow tea, and again, just like blindsided, this is a yellow tea that's equivalent of blindsided in its uniqueness. So this is the lineup we have upcoming. For those of you who aren't signed up, I urge you to sign up. For those of you who are, your responsibilities this week, well, this is for all of you. Stay healthy, and we look forward to seeing you next week. Bye-bye now.
Take care.